Hey everybody, welcome to Dispatches, an adventure motorcycle ride aimed at breaking down the stigma surrounding post-traumatic stress disorder in the veteran and first responder communities. My name is Mike Terry. I am a 23-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. I have been affected by PTSD since about 2001, and when I retired from the forces in April of 2018, I immediately started to notice that the effects of PTSD, the symptoms, just immediately got worse. So I started sharing my story on social media, my struggles with post-traumatic stress disorder and transition to civilian life. And then I bought a motorcycle and decided to tour Canada, sharing my story and encouraging others to share theirs. So yeah, that's how we got here. So last week we talked about hypervigilance and some of its impacts on or that I've experienced, and how it wears you down to be just in that constant state of hyper awareness where you're, cataloging and interpreting absolutely everything you see. So this week, and again, like I said, the aim is to eventually have control over that hypervigilance so that it doesn't completely rule your life. It's just not, the default setting. Because when you don't need it, it creates this, this buildup of anxious energy and, and negative energy. So, what I want to talk about this week is outlets. Now, one of the reasons I decided to, do dispatches as a motorcycle ride, and kind of use that as my outreach vehicle is because motorcycling is a huge outlet for being hypervigilant. When I look back on my military career, you were in a lot of dangerous situations, whether it was training, whether it was operations, and being hypervigilant was the way you did your business. You had to. That was there's the only way to conduct yourself in a way that you were going to be able to do what you need to do. You're going to be able to survive. But at the end of those days, they could be super long days. Again, lots of moving parts, lots of stimulation, and at the end of those days, you could leave still feeling, like you were exhausted. But it's not this anxious exhausted, it is very, sorry, lost my train of thought there. You're exhausted from working all day and expending that cognitive energy, but you don't carry any of that anxiousness with you because instead of, never realizing a threat or never, they're always just perceived threats. There's never any real potential for that danger. You existed in an environment where there actually was, so it served a purpose. So you don't kind of hang on to that anxiousness. It served its purpose, and now you can put it down. Sorry, I'm just gonna navigate this turn here because there's a fair bit of traffic on this road. So yeah, motorcycling. Huge parallel to the job that I did before, and the way I was trained as a motorcycle rider was to employ, the way we, were taught to ride defensively was using what's called the SIPDE model, SIPDE. So scan, interpret, predict, determine, execute. And basically, so you scan your environment, looking for potential threats. You interpret what you see. So is it a threat? Is it not a threat? Could a threat come from there? And, you predict what form that threat would take if it did exist, or you predict what offensive action that threat is going to take, or the outcomes, anything, right? And then you determine a course of action to mitigate that threat or to, to be able to react to it, and then you execute. And, when you look at patrolling, like either on foot or vehicle, mounted in vehicles, that process happens like in a split second. you go through that whole thing like, boom, I see this, boom, you run through that catalog and that interpretation, and you decide what you're going to do kind of in that moment. And yeah, like on a vehicle patrol in an armored vehicle moving at 80 kilometers per hour, especially through urban areas, this is happening almost like hundreds of times a minute. So it's a huge amount of cognitive energy. And it honestly just becomes ingrained. It becomes second nature as a soldier. And, that's good. The problem is when there's no actual physical danger or there's no potential for actual threats, you're still doing that. You're still cognitively getting exhausted, but there's also that anxiousness that comes with it because it's just, things just aren't right. But there's no reason for them to be. And so motorcycling, because it is inherently dangerous, because of that, it actually provides a good outlet for hypervigilance, because you need to be hypervigilant. You're riding on two wheels, so you have to be constantly balanced. You have to constantly be aware of road surface, environmental factors like wind, rain. You're always looking for other drivers. Other drivers don't see you. You don't have a cage protecting you. There is a lot of physical danger associated with motorcycling. But it's odd that I'm more at ease swinging a leg over this two-wheeled death machine than I am driving in a car. In a car, I feel closed in. I don't have to be as hyper alert, but I am. And I feel like I have less control. So it's weird. Statistically, I am much safer in that automobile. I'm more visible to other motorists. I don't have to worry about balancing this machine, but I do not feel as safe. I feel really anxious, and I can come out of driving a car and be like just completely worn down. Whereas I can go out for, and do, like when I was touring, a 12-hour day on this bike, and that cognitive energy, you're expending it all the time because you are looking at absolutely everything. And at the end of the day, you're tired, but you're not anxious. It's a good tired. So yeah, now that's great. I think that's why a lot of veterans gravitate towards motorcycling, because of that. And that's awesome. But you can't just be a one-trick pony. And if all you're doing, you've got this outlet, that's great, and this is the only outlet you have, what happens in the winter? What happens when you're injured and can't ride? What happens when your bike's broken down and you can't ride? What happens when you have other financial and family commitments? You can't ride. Well, if you have not cultivated other outlets, you're going to be in hard shape. So I've found other outlets that work. I do a lot of outdoor experience, a lot of outdoor adventure travel. So solo canoe tripping in the backcountry, backwoods camping, winter camping, hiking, all these things. And especially, like for instance, going out canoeing by myself in the backcountry, there's a danger there. Because even if I'm not traversing particularly dangerous waters, conditions can change in a minute if you're not paying attention. You can get yourself into trouble. You can dump the canoe. You can lose gear and then succumb to exposure. You can become injured. You can get sick. There's all these things. But, typically, is it as high-paced as motorcycling and as inherently dangerous? Probably not. But there's a different vibe to it. But at the end of the day, I still have to be hyper aware of everything that's going on around me, and I still have to, take all these factors into account. There is a physical risk, and so it provides an outlet for that hypervigilance. And I'm not talking about being an adrenaline junkie. I don't ride recklessly. I don't canoe like big white water or anything. So it's not about high octane adrenaline. It's just about, putting that hypervigilance and being, super dialed into your environment, putting it to good practical use so that it doesn't become stored as negative or anxious energy. So find yourself an outlet. If you don't ride, you don't want to go, backwoods canoe tripping for 10 days by yourself. I understand not everybody's into that. But find some outlet where you have to be, spatially, situationally, environmentally aware in order to safely conduct it. And, you may find that is it's a good pressure release by just, indulging that hypervigilance. Let it work. Let it do its thing. Instead of trying to constantly fight it and turn it off, let it out to play, but in a healthy way. And it's not, like I said, it's not enough just to have an outlet. You have to understand your outlet. You have to, seek to understand, why does this work for me, so that you can replicate it when circumstances don't allow you to explore that outlet. Or if for whatever reason, you can no longer engage in it, or it stops working, because coping mechanisms, they do get stressed, they get overburdened, and sometimes you got to switch it up. So, I encourage you to find something, figure out why it works, and then see how you can adapt that to other activities, other situations. So, I'm going to leave you with that today, guys. That feels like quite enough. And so next week, here, talk about being hypervigilant and why why it applies to motorcycling. That corner was absolutely full of gravel. Guys, leave you with that this week. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll be back next week to talk about how you can take hypervigilance and change the focus and the energy so that instead of wearing you down, it can actually energize you and calm you down. See you next week.